Hello UT and hello the world, I'm your host, Andrew Rosas. When you think about Mars, what comes to mind? Matt Damon? A candy bar no one's purchased in 50 years? Something you can't totally recall? Well, I've been thinking a lot about Mars lately, and so have the scientists here at UT. Most people know Mars from its harsh, barren red landscape that can't support any life, or Taylor Kitsch's career. But what people might not know is that just below the surface of Mars, there is tons of frozen water ice. Finally answering David Bowie's question, is there ice on Mars? Which he later changed to life because of an endorsement deal with Quaker Oats. One of the ice deposits that's recently been discovered contains as much water as Lake Superior, and hopefully only a fraction of the shipwrecks. We got to talk with Cassie Stuurman, a graduate researcher at the Institute for Geophysics at the Jackson School, to tell us more. So how did this project to search for subsurface ice begin?
There was a supervisor at my university that I liked, and he studied planetary science. I knew he did terrestrial impact crater work, and he also did a bit of Martian work, and that's what I was really interested in. He wasn't a geophysicist though, he was a geologist. And I came to him asking for a geophysics project, and he's like, well, I've had this idea for a bit regarding this geologic terrain in a certain region on Mars. And I think if we sounded it with radar, there might be subsurface ice there.
As a geophysicist, did you have any trouble translating this expertise to another planet?
I struggled a bit with processing the data and analyzing the data. Even visualizing the data was a challenge. So he ended up sending me to UT Austin to work here with a researcher, Dr. Jack Holt. And he and his students taught me the ropes of the Charade radar instrument on Mars.
So how does the discovery of this ice differ from other water ice on Mars we already know about?
So we know about ice on Mars in a variety of forms. Since the early imagery of Mars, we've known there's these polar caps, huge deposits of water ice that you can see on the surface of Mars at the North and South Pole. In addition to that, since we've sent this radar instrument to Mars, we've been finding ice in the subsurface through the mid-latitudes. So a big discovery in 2008, I believe, we found widespread deposits of glaciers in both the northern and southern hemisphere. That ice is very clean. It's buried by a layer of debris around 1 to 10 meters thick. And we've seen that it's flowed in the Martian past.
So how did Mars pick up all this ice? Did someone text it on the way to a party?
That's a question about early solar system history. As the planets were forming, they all had, well, the terrestrial ones, they all had an abundant amount of water. In the case of Earth, we did a great job holding on to that water and keeping it as our oceans, and we have our own ice sheets here. Venus, it all boiled off, it seems, because Venus got really hot. But Mars, I mean, it still has some of its water in the form of water ice, a lot of it actually, but some of it also has been blown away by the solar winds with the atmosphere.
Having this ice on Mars is incredibly exciting, especially if Mars is ever going to push for the Winter Olympics. So how could these deposits help human exploration of the planet?
If we are going to send astronauts to Mars, and it's no longer wacky to suggest that that might happen, we're going to need ice in the mid-latitudes, or even closer to the equator than that, in order to sustain colonies for both consumption and fuel production. This area in Utopia Planitia is accessible in some ways that other areas aren't. Those glaciers that I mentioned earlier are thought to be pretty rocky. They might be in areas of very high relief, so there's mountains nearby, and it's not as great a candidate for landing spacecraft there. If we look at plains ice, it's going to be really flat, and the water ice is covered by, well, we don't know exactly what the boulders would be like, but we think that it might be easier for astronauts and equipment to get around there.
My thanks to Cassie Stuurman for all the insight and for all the hard work that went into finding this ice. The discovery of an accessible water source on Mars is huge news for potential human exploration of the planet. Who knows, maybe one day we'll finally heed the words of one of the wisest men in all of science.
Get your ass to Mars.
Sage advice. Hey, if you like this video, please share it with your friends, like us on Facebook. You can also follow me on Twitter at Mr. Andrew Rosas, and also follow the Texas Exes as well. As always, I'm your host, Andrew Rosas, reminding you to stay hooked.